Hello, boys and girls. Today's episode features some crazy cryptids, one classic case from the 1950s, and one lesser-known doppelganger case from the late 1980s. These are just a few jewels from a book one of our epic viewers helped translate, so big shout out to Osvaldo Greco, who we love to see stop by our comment section. The Russian original translates to The Undead and Mysterious Creatures, and it was written by Mikhail Gershtein and Vadim Deruzhinsky. With no further ado, let's dive right in. This classic case reportedly took place near the American town of Flatwoods, West Virginia. On September 12th, in 1952, half an hour after sunset, several boys saw a meteor that flew over them, made a few maneuvers, and landed on top of a hill. It looked like a silver dollar hurtling across the sky. The boys jumped on bikes and raced home. Eddie and Fred May told their mother about the UFO. Kathleen May listened to her sons rather skeptically, but still gave in to their requests to go out and look at the hill. When she went outside, she was amazed. A few hundred meters away on the hillside, there was a glow. But what? Kathleen sent the boys to find 17-year-old Gene Lemon, a soldier in the National Guard. Lemon took a flashlight and led a group of people to the hill. The group, consisting of Mrs. May, her two sons, Eddie, 13, and Fred, 12, Gene Lemon, Cale Nunley, 14, 10-year-olds Ronnie Shaver and Tommy Heyer, all walked toward the light. Finally, they saw a large ball of fire, 10 to 12 meters in diameter. It was pulsating slowly, like a dimly glowing pile of red coals. There was a very unpleasant odor in the air. Lemon's dog bristled and shook as if in a fever, staring somewhere to the side. Lemon directed the beam of the flashlight at the bushes, where the dog was looking. Kathleen screamed in horror. There was something alive there. The light of the flashlight snatched from the darkness the head and shoulders of a creature 3 meters tall. On the stranger's head was some kind of hood. The body reflected the light of the flashlight in much the same way as silk material flowing in the wind would. The face was terrifying, a crimson-red ball with huge glowing green-orange eyes. The monster's lower limbs were hidden by bushes and grass, but it seemed to the entire group that it was not walking, but rather gliding along the surface of the ground, emitting gas with a sharp hiss. The terrible stench grew stronger. Gene Lemon's dog ran away, and its owner, Numb, dropped the flashlight and fell backwards. Having come to their senses a little, they all rushed back down the hill. Kathleen May, in fear, jumped over a high fence, which in a normal state she would hardly have been able to overcome. And the other guys do not remember the details of the panicked flight at all. Having calmed down, they immediately called the sheriff and the newspaper editor, Lee Stewart. About half an hour later, they both arrived at Flatwoods, finding Mrs. May and the boys in a state of deep, nervous shock. The boys, Lemon, and even his dog were still sick from the gas. In the morning, a group of armed adults, led by Lemon and the sheriff, again went to the top of the hill. But the glowing UFO had disappeared. Only an unpleasant odor and strange prints resembling sled runners remained. Some oily liquid had settled on Eddie and Fred's faces, which May, noticing this, immediately wiped off. The boys' throats were so burned by the gas that they could not eat or drink for a long time. The doctor said that the symptoms were similar to mustard gas poisoning. Gene Lemon vomited all night, and even 2 weeks later, he could not drink carbonated drinks, which immediately caused a sharp pain in the throat. The local school principal saw it too. He had no idea what the others had gone through that night, but he had caught sight of the UFO when it rose from the hill and had called the newspaper the next morning. As the UFO took off, Lemon's mother's house shook so much that she became concerned that it had moved from its foundation. Her radio cut out without warning, and about 45 minutes later, it just came back on by itself. That same night, George and Edith Snitovsky were driving along the highway near Flatwoods. Suddenly, their car stopped for no apparent reason. A foul odor filled the air, causing their child to vomit. George got out of the car to see what was going on, and saw a huge glowing ball floating slowly above the ground down the hillside. He tried to approach, and immediately felt as if thousands of vibrating needles were piercing his skin. The sensation was unpleasant, and George preferred to return to the car. Edith screamed that something was approaching them. George turned and saw a figure about 8 feet tall with a huge head, a bloated body and long, thin arms, which was quickly sliding toward them. The frightened spouses locked the car from the inside. The figure stretched out its hand to the windshield, and although the creature made no attempt to break it, the sight was so terrifying that the Snitovskys immediately hid under the seats. When George risked getting out, the monster was already moving toward the glowing balloon. Finally, the balloon, swinging from side to side, rose up and flew away, leaving a clearly visible trail in the sky. The next day, they found a burnt spot in the shape of the letter V on the hood of the car. Later, investigators found out that a 21-year-old woman was in the hospital in Clarksburg. Some believed her injuries were tied to the same events we've just heard about. She met the monster a week before September 12th. The poisoning by the toxic gas was so severe that she lay in the ward for 3 weeks. In the summer of 1987, a similar figure was seen in Russia. It didn't give off gas this time, and it was too far away for anyone to feel its effects, but the account by A.V. Lomonosov was no less unsettling and enigmatic. This happened in the small village of Baryshevo, on the Karelian Isthmus, 135 kilometers from Leningrad. Our wooden house for one family was located on the outskirts, on the very edge of the village. Behind a small hay meadow, a dense mixed forest darkened. Directly opposite the windows, a narrow country road, riddled with potholes and ruts, ran through the field. That night, we couldn't sleep for a long time. 3 stray dogs that we fed were constantly hanging around the house. Now they were behaving strangely. They growled, barked, and rushed onto the road where no one was walking. But as soon as they jumped out onto it, they immediately tucked their tails between their legs and went back. Something was clearly bothering the dogs. My parents and my little brother all noticed and wondered what it could be. Ultimately, Father went outside and tried to drive the dogs away, but they suddenly began to whine pitifully and press themselves against his legs, asking to come into the house. Father didn't let them in, came back and sat by the window. "Look," he suddenly shouted. Above the dark, jagged wall of the forest, we saw a dim green glow. If it weren't for the color, it could have been taken for the first rays of the rising sun. The clock showed 23:55. The dogs were whining desperately and began to scratch at the door. And then, we saw a strange, tall figure on the road. Dark, in a pointed headdress, in flowing sleeveless clothing, it moved smoothly, floating along the road. The man in the robe walked high, with his head raised, completely unaware of the holes and potholes under his feet. He walked surprisingly evenly and straight, as if he was flying above the ground. Or maybe he really was flying. His legs, if he had any, were covered up to the knees by a whitish, foggy cloud, moving along with him. Finally, the man drew level with our window. He stood there for about a minute, and then suddenly slowly turned to face us. "Look, he has no head," Mom cried out. Indeed, there was nothing in the black hole of the hood. If there was a face, it was very dark, and from this darkness, 2 glowing red eyes looked out brightly and strangely. The creature stared at us for a long time. We froze and could not take our eyes off it. The glow above the forest continued to grow. It had already covered half the sky, and the entire area around was flooded with a deathly green light. Distinct, bizarre shadows fell from the trees onto the ground. The creature did not cast a shadow. It turned sideways to us again and slowly moved along the road to the forest, having walked only a few meters. Then the white cloud stopped, and after a few seconds, we saw a dark figure rising up against the illuminated sky. The cloud that remained on the ground quickly dissipated. About 40 minutes later, the glow over the forest began to disappear. In the morning, no traces were found on the road. 2 of the 3 dogs disappeared to an unknown location, and no one saw them again. It is clear that with the Enlenauts, things are not as simple as they seem. They can appear and disappear without moving from the spot. Manifest partially, for example, as a torso without arms and legs, turn into a fireball or a cloud, glide above the ground without moving their legs, fly, penetrate walls, change their appearance and even size before our eyes. The variety of UFO pilots is so great that ufologist Gordon Crichton stated, "The endless variability in the descriptions of these entities has led me to no longer believe in the existence of many different types of such beings, and to feel that we are, rather, the victims of some manipulation of which we have no idea." Stories Lost have done some surface-level digging on modern commentators. The Flatwoods Monster case, in particular, has had its share of skeptical theories. That night in September 1952, a meteor was sighted across 3 states: Maryland, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. Braxton County, being in West Virginia, was in a region where the phenomenon would have been clearly visible. Joe Nickel of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry concluded that the witnesses had seen the meteor and that the creature was, in fact, an owl, its appearance distorted by fear and heightened anxiety. The flashing red lights, possibly even the eyes, were likely from an aircraft navigation or hazard beacon. What we find most interesting are the links and connections between cases that the book, The Undead and Mysterious Creatures, serves up. It is well worth a read, and these 2 cases are far from the strangest. One more shout out to Osvaldo Greco before we sign off on this one. Thanks, friend. And thanks to all you other friends of the channel out there. You make us what we are here on YouTube. Thanks for the coffee and supers. And thanks to our members and Patreons. See you next week.